Tonight, the first live leaders' debate of the general election campaign. Unscripted, unedited, the leaders of the four largest parties go head-to-head to compete for your vote.
We'll be putting questions to them that matter to you, the voter. Then you can decide who runs the country for the next 5 years.
This is a case of where the decision being made by the people is the most critical of the past 50 years.
We have to stay the course, not throw it away.
This government has allowed problems to escalate to crisis levels.
I will not be lectured to by people to try and make cheap political shots.
Hello and welcome to the Leaders' Debate. Tonight's programme is also being simulcast live on News Talk Radio. For the next hour and a half, we'll be putting questions to four leaders who hope to become Taoiseach or Taoiseach after the votes are cast 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Now, the standing positions and order of opening statements has been decided by drawing lots. We're going to do our best to make sure that all four get an equal amount of time to speak. But this is a debate, so microphones are open at all times and you're all invited to interject as appropriate.
Well, first, a 60-second opening statement from each party leader, starting with Joan Burton.
I grew up in a working-class home where money was tight and hard work was valued. I was lucky enough to get a good education. I was given opportunities and I took them. I want every child to have the same opportunities. Our country has been through a tough time, but now we can make Ireland a great place to live, work and raise a family. To seize that opportunity, we have to make the right choice on election day. Do we stick with the plan that's working or gamble on an uncertain future? This election is about the next 5 years. Labour is central to providing the stable and balanced government our country needs. We will strengthen the recovery and use our strong economy to build a decent society. Thank you.
And thank you, Joan Burton. Well, next is the turn of An Taoiseach and leader of Fine Gael, Enda Kenny.
Fáilte over fad. Good evening, everyone watching at home. Your hard work has seen us through a difficult time. Now our economy is recovering. We're creating jobs. We're rebuilding public services. Our young people are starting to come home. But that's just the beginning. This job is far from over. So at the election, you face just one question. Who can you trust to keep this recovery going? Fine Gael has a long-term economic plan to keep it going and to make life better for everyone in Ireland. Our plan is based on a simple proposition, that of a strong economy. Because a strong economy delivers jobs. A strong economy delivers work that pays. A strong economy delivers the services we need and depend on in our daily lives. We cannot go back to those who wrecked our economy previously or to those who would wreck it in the future. With your support, Fine Gael will keep the recovery going. I will therefore ask respectfully for your support on February 26th. Gora Mahagif.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. Now on to the opening statement from Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin.
In this election, we have a duty to focus on the issues. And we need to put aside the rehearsed slogans and give the Irish people a debate as serious as their issues. We face a fundamental choice about the future we want. Will we move forward together, or will we continue on the road of being more divided and more unfair? We can have a strong economy and a decent society. We can't risk just keeping going with the crisis after crisis we see in health, housing, crime, pensions, disability and other vital public services. We can't risk the continued failure to recognise any problem until it becomes a crisis. There is a fairer way. We do not have to accept that nothing can change. We can have an Ireland which serves all of its people. Thank you.
Micheál Martin, thank you very much. And finally, we go to the Sinn Féin President, Gerry Adams.
Gora Margaret. The women and the men of 1916 envisaged a republic where people are citizens, not subjects. Phoblacht bhfuil cearta ag daoine. Sinn Féin believes that citizens have fundamental rights. Instead, Fine Gael, Labour and Fianna Fáil have brought chaos to your lives. They have no plan for a sustainable or a fair recovery. They're committed to the reckless policy of boom and bust. In this election, you, the citizen, have a choice between a new government which will build a rights-based society or one that rewards the golden circles. Sinn Féin is in government in the north. We're looking a mandate to be in government here also. The peace process is one of the big achievements of modern Irish history. Sinn Féin has delivered on that. We want to deliver also on the promise of the 1916 proclamation. Enda Kenny says this is the best place in the world to do business in. Sinn Féin is more ambitious for our people. We want in Ireland, all 32 counties, to be the best place to grow up in, to grow old in, to enjoy life in. And for the first time, folks, there's an opportunity to elect a progressive government. Tá sé an am vótáil de Sinn Féin.
Gerry Adams, thank you very much. Now, we're going to address different issues throughout the programme tonight, throughout the debate, and we thought we might start on taxation. And Taoiseach, I'll start with you, because one of the most publicised of your policies in the manifesto is the abolition over the period of the next term of the USC. That means forsaking maybe €4 billion. Can we afford to do that?
Yes. Our proposals for tax would be that every worker in the country will be better off at the end of the programme. Our programme is to create 200,000 new jobs, to bring back 70,000 emigrants who were driven out because of economic circumstances. So the abolition of the universal social charge, a penal tax introduced by Fianna Fáil, is a tax on work. And our priority with the Labour Party for the last number of years was to fix our finances, create jobs. The burden of taxation is too high on people. So what we will do for every middle-income earner and every low-income earner, we'll reduce the level of taxation to 44%. And for everybody else, just under 50, those who earn most will pay most. Our focus and priority is on the middle-income and lower-income workers. We've proven that in the last two budgets with reductions of the USC at the lower level
I know it's
and
not
increases in the minimum wage.
I know it's not a popular thing to do, but to say the higher earners will have a clawback of 5%, why? I mean, they were charged the USC as an emergency measure. Why should they be charged this clawback? Was it that the politicians were embarrassed when people like Gerry Adams pointed out that ministers and Taoiseach and Taoiseach would be better off, much better off, with the USC being abolished?
Well, they will pay a 5% clawback over 100,000 because they earn more. And the issue here is that those who earn most will pay most.
No, but it was emergency for them, emergency for everybody else. Why are you clawing back? Because I do suspect that you only clawed back after it was pointed out that ministers would do very well out of this, given their salaries.
Not so. It was always the intention that those who earn most would pay most. And the focus here is particularly and specifically on those from 70,000 down. We've taken 400,000 out of any liability of the universal social charge at the moment. So for those who earn most, they pay most. And with particular reference to 70,000 down is where the priority is. Those who need it most will get the most benefit.
Okay. Gerry Adams, you don't want to abolish this for the very reason, you know, $4 billion is hard to come by. But the idea that anyone over 19.5 grand a year would pay USC seems a bit hard to swallow.
Well, first of all, the Taoiseach will be €12,000 better off. And all of those who are in the upper echelons will be better off. Our first priority will be to get rid of water charges. Our first priority will be to get rid of the property tax, the family home tax. Now, you have to look at our tax measures.
Can I do some sums with you?
Okay.
430 plus about 470 is 900 million that you're giving back to people by not charging them water, not charging them for property. But the Taoiseach, if he has his way, he'll be giving back 4 billion. Yeah, so you're not giving back very much.
But the Taoiseach will not put money into public services. And what we're saying, and we've worked this out in a very meticulous and a very, very forensic way. We have worked with the Department of Finance. The Taoiseach sums don't work out. There is 8.6 billion available if the economy continues to grow, and we want to grow the economy. We're also bringing in new taxes, those earning over 100,000, a sugar tax, a nicotine tax, a tax on gambling. We're also making savings, so that will give us a round figure of about 10 million, and we are going to put 4 billion of that into public services, into growing the economy, into housing, and keeping money back in case there's a contingency.
Housing. The property tax largely goes to local authorities. With that money they get from the property tax, they build social housing. So where's the money that they would have had from the property tax going to come from?
Local authority houses built last year. 100,000 people on the housing list, and this government shamefully only allowed for the building of 28 social and affordable housing. We will invest in social housing because people as citizens have the right to a home.
Micheál Martin.
Can I just come in here and say, first of all, we believe that working families need a break. Okay, so we do believe actually in reducing the universal social charge, not eliminating it. Because the Fine Gael plan would reward people on 200,000, 300,000 by thousands of euros. It's weighted to the wealthiest. That's the Fine Gael.
Okay, but I put this to Sinn Féin yesterday in
Yes.
Donegal, that you get someone coming to Cork who wants to create 1,000 jobs in your constituency. And the guy says, well, you know, I'm going to have to bring IT people in and engineers. And you're going to take massive amounts of tax from them.
No, I'm not.
So why would I bother?
We're not taking any additional tax from anybody. But we're simply not bringing in a new tax system that would favour the wealthiest. And if I could finish my point, we're going to reduce USC for all earnings up to 80,000. We're going to reduce dirt tax, for example, because pensioners in particular feel very aggrieved by the successive increases in that. We're going to bring in a childcare tax credit, again to help working families with young children, up to €2,000, to make it more affordable for them, because it's a big issue with young families and children. In addition to that, if I may, we're going to also help working families in terms of extending mortgage interest relief for another number of years. Those are important measures that are targeted at a key group in our society who've been hit hard, working families. And we will also abolish water charges,
that point
which will help working families as well.
Might be appropriate to Louth, your constituency. Someone comes in, wants to create 1,000 jobs. And your penal tax, which is a 7% on top of everything else, would say to the guys, look, we're not going to do it. And extra PRSI for employers, they're going to say, why would we bother creating jobs?
We are looking for tax fairness. We will not add any tax increases on anybody earning below 100,000. We will put money into people's pockets. We will encourage particularly the self-employed who are penalised under the current system, and the medium and small businesses, the backbone of our jobs creation process, and they have to suffer with upward-only rents, with
sure, but wouldn't the guy who's going to create 1,000 jobs in your constituency, wouldn't he be a bit miffed about having to pay 70% tax?
If he was getting public services, or she was getting public services that were fit for purpose as opposed to what we have at the moment, because people are paying more. Invisibly, stealth taxes, all the other exorbitant, meaning little cuts that have been put in, and they're getting less for their money.
Joan Burton, in your constituency, we saw a headline on the front of The Independent today that you could lose your seat, because that's what the polls are saying. You look at the other people in your constituency, what are they offering? They're offering tax cuts, they're offering no water charges, no property charges. You, on the left, in the Labour Party, as you would have it, are at odds with the way they are campaigning and at odds with the way many of the people in your own constituency would want policy.
Well, I've faced difficult elections on every occasion, and I've come through in 2002, 2007, and let's see, people will not make up their mind in this election until towards voting day. But just let me say, in relation to what Labour wants to offer, firstly, we want to put the emphasis on continuing to create employment. We've unemployment now down between ourselves and Fine Gael to 8.6%. And for everybody who earns less than 72,000, we will abolish USC over a period of 5 years. I'm very I have to say, mystified to see that Sinn Féin are saying they'll only abolish it up to 19,572. So if a young person who gets a job is earning 21,000 and Jerry is going to give them back €60 on the water charges, and that young person is unlikely to have their own home, they're likely to be paying rent to a landlord, and you know what? You're going to give a tax break to their landlord, Jerry. What kind of economics is this?
Well,
it's fuzzy Sinn Féin economics.
Do you think
that is a job killer.
Do you think anyone
it's a job killer.
Do you think anyone watching this programme will believe you or the Taoiseach on your election promises?
Well, they certainly won't believe you.
Well, they certainly believe
you if you got a chance
because
of 50%
income tax and
33%.
You were going to get rid of the HSE, an invention of Micheál Martin. You were going to get. Sorry, let me. Taoiseach, please. Taoiseach, I promise not to interrupt you. If you promise not to interrupt me. So all of your promises, you were going to get rid of HSE, you were going to bring in a universal insurance, you were going to bring in free prescriptions, you were going to bring in medical cards. Every single one of them stroked off. You said one of your red line issues was disability. People or children with disabilities would be looked after. You broke that as well. Child benefit, Taoiseach, you said you would not bring in child benefit.
I increased it by €5 a month over the last 2 years since I became Taoiseach.
These are the parties of broken promises.
We need to establish a few truisms here.
mustn't have been
Governments
listening
don't
to the
create
budgets.
jobs, by the way. And the Taoiseach said, you know, we create. Governments do not, and politicians do not create jobs. Businesses create jobs around this country. And we shouldn't insult businesses and people who take risk by saying things like politicians create jobs. We don't. We can create the conditions that help entrepreneurs. And we have a very enterprising tax policy, for example, for new start-up companies in terms of a new 10% tax rate up to 15 million of chargeable gains. Why? Because that would make us more competitive than the United Kingdom. We also believe, if I may say so, that we should equalise the treatment of the self-employed under the PAYE system with PAYE workers. That is also important.
We're doing
Thank you.
that.
Neither Sinn Féin nor Fianna Fáil can have any of this unless you have an economy that thrives, unless you create jobs, and by reducing taxes, more people working, you have resources to invest in these things. Jerry Adams says that Fine Gael would not invest in public services. Of our 10.1 billion, 4.1 billion is directly into services. Now, if you think, Jerry, that the people watching at home tonight, you are going to charge them 50% tax on an income of 33,800. That means that you're going to have a 65% marginal tax rate. You would drive thousands of jobs out of the country every week. You would ruin and wreck our economy, and that's why I said at the beginning, it can't go to people who would wreck it in the future. This man wrecked it in the past.
Yeah, okay. And look, what did you say before Christmas? You said you wanted Ireland's personal tax rates to be the same as the United States.
Where did I say that?
Well, you said it to the media beforehand. I have a quoted here. One of the things we have to reach out to is to make personal tax rates competitive with Britain and with Australia and with Canada and with the US. And the Irish people understand what that means in terms of the decimation of public services. We believe in a 2-to-1 split. We're saying invest in services more because you keep going on. You keep going on about a strong economy, Taoiseach, but people can't wait anymore for the health service, for the crisis.
We get the point, Micheál Martin.
And crime and so on.
This man's party drove 250,000 young people out of the country. I want to bring back 70,000 by the end of 2021. They're working in countries now where they're paying less income tax, less marginal income tax than here. We are not competitive in the way that we should be. So if we can reduce taxes by abolishing the USC, we relieve that tax on work, we have more people in the workplace, therefore we have more to invest in the employment of teachers. I would say that our plan envisages 10,000 extra public servants.
We need to be clear that low and middle income families need to see the back of the USC that Fianna Fáil brought in as a second income tax at the height of the crisis. The crisis, gentlemen, is over. And now we're building the country. And I heard Micheál talking there about the HSE. We have put in over 900 million in 2015 into the HSE. We've brought in another 500 million. When Micheál set up the HSE, he was always one report away from making a better HSE. But he never succeeded. He left the job.
Hang on, guys.
Statement you've just made,
I want to
the HSE, one second now.
No, Micheál, we're coming to that right now because Colette wants to handle questions on health.
Okay, we're going to talk about. All right, no. Okay, just one very quickly.
Under Sinn Féin, average workers will have a marginal tax rate of 30%, and those earning under €100,000 will have a marginal tax rate of 50%. They will also have public services.
All right, just very quickly, and then we're going to move on to talk about health. Very quickly.
The HSE director has said that 2016 will be the worst year in a decade for the health service, and that you underprovided it by 150 million. That's what the individual said. You doctored his report.
Not true.
Also, what was revealed last week, Taoiseach, you just said it again. You repeated the untruth about 10,000 extra public servants. In health, for every new nurse appointed, some other person has to be made redundant.
All right, we're going to talk about health now. Okay, Micheál, if you just bear with us now one moment, we're going to talk about health. Joan Burton, the Labour Party has been in government for the last 5 years. This week, in a hospital in Galway, a 95-year-old man spent 56 hours on a trolley. That's more than 2 days. Are you responsible for that as government?
That shouldn't happen, and the HSE that Micheál established and left as fast as he could is responsible for the actual management of our hospitals, and no elderly person should be on a trolley. So, Colette, we have to change our system. First of all, what we have to do is move to primary care in this country so that elderly people who just don't have to go into hospital, or when they do have to go into hospital, it's by pre-arrangement, and they pass by they pass by the ANA. And that's happening, by the way, in a number of our hospitals.
But Joan Burton, if the government isn't
plans.
responsible for that, and we've had reports right throughout the last 5 years, a 100-year-old woman spending time in a trolley in Tala Hospital, and people in their 60s and 70s. And if the government isn't responsible, who is responsible then if you and your government wasn't responsible?
We have built, at this point in time, 60 new primary care centres. You can see them right around the country, 3 in my own constituency, but in every county in Ireland. And the plan, Colette, is very simple. It's to ensure that people, instead of going to an acute hospital for things that could be treated at the local level in primary care centres, and when an elderly person is in hospital, we have vastly improved the fair deal, so people can get a bed within 4 weeks, and that means that we can free up more hospital beds.
But the charge, Joan Burton, to the Labour Party is that you made pledges and promises back in 2011, and you said you would protect the most vulnerable people in society, and that you have broken those promises. Your party colleague, just let me finish, your party colleague, Pat Rabbitte, is on record as saying that's what politicians do during elections. He admitted that politicians make promises that they don't intend to keep, that they break.
And the last time Fianna Fáil were in government, they destroyed over 300,000 people who lost their jobs. And what the Labour Party did was promised, first of all, to fix a broken economy. Fianna Fáil ran the economy.
All right, we're not talking about the economy now, we're talking about health.
Over the cliff. So what we had to do was to pick up a ruin and actually build it up again, get people back to work. So now we're employing more doctors, more nurses,
Joan Burton, we're
and
done talking
building
about the
community
economy.
care centres.
Taoiseach Enda Kenny, you wanted to end the scandal of patients on trolleys. 539 people were on trolleys in this country on Tuesday.
Well, the first thing I'd say is that people who use the health service should be able to rely on it and depend upon it. And there are clearly incidents where that hasn't been able to measure up. Now, we have made progress, and the health programme here is based on 4 pillars: Healthy Ireland, obesity, alcohol, smoking, and so on. Advancing universal health care for everybody, the capacity building in the hospitals, the 4,400 extra staff since last year.
All right, you said you'd end waiting lists, and you said you'd end the trolley crisis.
Yes, the 4th pillar is reform, and the HSE, community, hospital groups, and so on. Clearly, it's not a satisfactory position
you
to have
your promise,
anybody lying
you?
on a trolley for that length of time. The waiting lists and the trolley waits have reduced because of extra money being put in, but it's still not satisfactory, and there's a great deal of work to be done there. But you cannot deal with the investment in health that you require unless your economy is pushing ahead. Fianna Fáil took out 1,000 beds out of it. We've put back 300. We put in 900 million in the last 2 years, an increase in the budget for the first time. We took over a bankrupt
you
country.
broke your promise in terms of ending. You pledged in 2011 that you would end the trolley crisis and that you would end waiting lists.
I regret that we haven't been able to do that. This man said he would end it forever in 2 years, and said we were providing enough money for trolleys, that there shouldn't be trolleys in corridors, and then ran out of the Department of Health and accepted no responsibility for it. I accept responsibility for our government's actions.
All right, Micheál Martin.
I think the man has some brass neck to talk like he's talked about health. Their policies, their performance is disgrace. They made promises before the last election. Look, I didn't interrupt you, and you better face up to it.
You
better face up to it. Before the last election, you said that you would bring in... Are you going to listen or not? Can you not face up to your own failures in terms of health policy? When you said you'd bring in universal health insurance, you told me day after day in the Dáil that it was on target, that it was going to happen, and Leo Varadkar at the 11th hour said it's not going to happen. You fixed the figures in terms of the waiting list.
300 consultants.
You said, Taoiseach, you're interrupting non-stop because you can't face the truth.
Facts.
Waiting lists, you changed it to 12-month waiting target, 15-month waiting target, 18-month waiting target. And what happened? They broke every one of their targets. They took medical cards from the sickest children in this country, and they took medical cards from chronically sick people.
Okay, you were Minister for Health yourself. You weren't recently there when Fianna Fáil unveiled its own health policy. Were you afraid of facing tricky questions about your own record in the Department of Health?
Pardon, by any metric, go back on my performance in health. I spent 4 years in the Department of Health.
You took away free GP care for the over 70s.
I didn't actually. I was the minister who brought in free medical cards, actually, for the over 70s. I brought in that move when I was Minister of Health between 2000 and 2004. My point is this: by any metric, we were treating far more people with far more successes in terms of outcomes before this government took over the health system.
You also pledged to end the trolley crisis, and you also pledged to end waiting lists. We transformed
heart disease in this country with a cardiovascular strategy. We transformed the way we did cancer care in terms of the National Centres for Excellence. I remember Fine Gael and Labour running around the country trying to undermine what was a good strategy to get better outcomes from people in terms of treatment of cancer and treatment of heart. I brought in the smoking ban, which has up to date saved 6,000 lives, which I think was probably the biggest public health measure and most significant public health measure in a generation. And the Taoiseach, before the last election, knew the situation in the country. He went ahead without having a clue of what he was talking about in terms of universal health insurance, and we find out 5 years later that it's not possible. And my final point is this. The Taoiseach is saying that they're going to bring in free GP care in the next 5 years. They promised that, Fine Gael did 5 years ago and didn't implement it. And Leo Varadkar has now said it's not implementable
just in terms
because we don't have enough
GPs. I want to get Gerry Adams in here. You want to throw more money at the health service.
No, we don't, Claire. Yeah, we will put more money into it, but you see, where we differ basically from these other parties, these parties have broken promises, is that we are for a universal health care system. So as a citizen, you have the right, from birth to the cradle, to a wrap-around health service paid from in progressive taxation. And what we would say, if you arrive at a hospital, you should be looked after according to your health needs, not according to your wealth. And we have costed this. It's a detailed plan. It isn't an election.
But you've no record on health, do you? I mean, only up the north, and there's hospital closures and bed closures in the north.
There is not the same crisis that there is in this state. And here's the other thing, and we must all remember this. These folks had a choice, as Micheál had a choice. They get rid of 1,700 hospital beds. They get rid of 7,500 health workers. And the money that they had, where did they give the money to? To the banks. Even a fraction of the billions they give to the banks would have made a huge difference to health services.
I just want to talk about medical cards. I just want to make a point to you, because there was a U-turn on the medical cards. Just let me make this point here. No, just let me ask you about medical cards first.
20% down on this day last year, and 20% lower than when Micheál Martin last.
You've broken every record in terms of trolleys, waiting lists, and what have you in health. The biggest mistake you made is you appointed James Riley as Minister for Health. That was the biggest mistake you made, because it's widely acknowledged that the system became chaotic under his remit. Chaotic in terms of governance of the health system and in terms of how he dealt with people in the service. And that's why morale is so low.
In his proposal for health, Fianna Fáil proposed to spend 230 million extra a year. The government have already put in 300 million a year, and we're committed to 500 million a year for each of the next 5 years. We have more GPs with contracts with the HSE than ever before, and more GPs in the country.
There's a crisis in rural
I might ask the Sinn Féin leader over here. I understand in his proposition is to recruit 230 obstetricians in 5 years. Now, we train 10 per year. Do the mathematics there for me, Gerry, please.
No, see, I'll deal with our propositions. We will employ 6,000...
I have to read it.
Sorry, well, that's good that you're reading Sinn Féin policy. It's a pity you don't pay any heed to Sinn Féin policy. Because you don't believe Taoiseach. You see, what you
I have to get Joan Burton in here. Joan Burton, just let Joan Burton talk. Just let Joan Burton talk.
Gerry Adams in this debate seems to be arguing in the context of the austerity that his party is presiding over in the north at the moment. What's happening in the north at the moment, as you said yourself, Colette, is that hospitals and hospital services are being cut back, staff are being let go and subject to voluntary retirement agreements and forced retirement if they don't agree on a voluntary basis.
All right, I just want to ask you,
just bear with. Can Gerry Adams be to lecture to the three of us. May I say this to Micheál Martin? He does deserve credit, absolute credit, for the smoking ban, Micheál. I will say that. But what this government has done, what myself and Enda have focused on equally, is the whole thing of making our population healthier. And this is what the primary care centres are about.
Joan Burton, on the issue of medical cards.
You guys sacked Roisin Shortall because of our commitment to primary care centres in disadvantaged areas. You left her hang out to dry. It was a milestone in how Labour was acting in the government. You should have stood by Roisin Shortall, but you shafted her and she wanted to put primary care centres into the most disadvantaged areas in the country.
All right, just one speaker at a time. Just one speaker at a time. Just sorry, Taoiseach.
Don't be so petty.
And we give you credit for that.
Don't be so petty.
You were in government, but then you ran out of the department.
Well, how did I run out of the department? What kind of nonsense?
What
kind of silly talk is that? But
can we talk about the future?
Sorry.
What's very interesting
Can I just ask you, Micheál Martin, if you ended up in a coalition with Fine Gael, OK, would you like one of your own TDs to be given the health portfolio? Would you be afraid of that?
Absolutely. I'm committed to health. I went into health twice. Before the 2002 election, and I went in afterwards to finish through the National Health Strategy, which was quite transformative in terms of how health was dealt with in this country, particularly in terms of heart disease, and go out and ask heart specialists about the transformative nature of that.
OK, just before we finish.
I wanted to make a very important point. The real problem here is the disconnect of government. Enda Kenny doesn't listen, and that's why problems became crises. So, for example, we spent 2 years saying to Enda Kenny, 2 years we said, there's a problem with discretionary medical care. Young children aren't getting it. And he would not listen. He doesn't listen.
All right, OK, just before we go to a break, all right, Taoiseach, OK, nobody can hear you at home. You're all talking over each other. Taoiseach, just before we go to break, can I ask you, do you regret asking people with severe illnesses and disabilities and people with Down syndrome and motor neuron disease to justify their need for a medical card?
I think that issue about the medical cards is one that we could have done without. I agree that many of these cases, Colette, were absolutely sensitive, and I'm glad that that matter has been rectified. I'm glad that, and put it this way to you, we cannot have a health service or any other health service that we aspire to unless we have an economy that's driving forward, and that means creation of jobs, because it's all about people. This man closed 1,245 beds in the hospital regime.
We're going to move on now, guys. We're going to move on.
People, they have to wait for better services. That's what you're saying. They have to wait. We can't wait any longer.
We are going to move on. But I would ask you all, maybe over the break, to ponder something. We spend second only to the United States on our health service. Why have all of you, any of you in government anywhere, not managed to run a proper service with the money that is there to run it? Because we do spend second only to the United States. We will leave it there for the moment. Coming up next, we'll be talking about crime and security. Don't go away. Welcome back. This is the Leaders' Debate, live on TV3 and on News Talk 106 to 108. There's an extended Tonight programme with Ivan Yates and guests. That's happening on this station at 10:30. But we want to move on now to crime and security. And I want to go to you, Gerry Adams, because you are at odds, if you like, with the others in terms of the Special Criminal Court. Set up in 1972 by Dessie O'Malley to combat what was going on, acts by the Provisional IRA and other organisations. And the suspicion is that that's really at the heart of your objection to the Special Criminal Court.
Not at all. And our position on the Special Criminal Court, which is shared in part by the Labour Party despite their protestations, is simply around the core democratic principle that citizens should be tried by a jury of their peers. Now, notwithstanding our position, that isn't the problem with the crime at this moment, with organised crime, with the brutal murders in Dublin, with the problem which is besetting rural communities, with the stealing of farm machinery, burglaries and all of the rest of it. It's because Fianna Fáil closed Templemore. Between them, this government and the previous one got rid of 3,500 Garda positions. The guards don't have the facilities. If you talk to the guards, I talked to them in my constituency in Loughton, 2 brave guards were killed in County Louth. They will tell you that they don't have the resources or the capacity to deal with this.
They will also tell you they want the Special Criminal Court.
Well, fair enough.
So you listen to them on one front, but you won't listen to them on the other.
But that's not what politics is about. I have a democratic opinion to put that position. But what these folks did was seize upon that on the back of these brutal murders in order to try and have a cheap shot at Sinn Féin. Now, I don't back away from our position on the Special Criminal Court, but I do insist...
Is there nothing in your position that is rooted in the fact that, for example, Martin Ferris, a TD of Sinn Féin TD, tried by the Special Criminal Court, the killers of Jerry McCabe were in front of the Special Criminal Court. Many people that you know and have associated with over the years were in front of that court. And, you know, the suspicion is that that's where your rooted objection to it lies more than the democratic principles.
Notwithstanding the injury and the death caused to those families, and my family also have suffered injury and death, notwithstanding that, this is about the future. This is about placing with the community and having a Garda Síochána which is properly resourced, which has the capacity, which has a guard on the beat. They closed 140 Garda stations. I know guards, and the network of roads is being used by highly mobile criminal gangs. They've old jalopies. They don't have the backup that's required.
Gerry Adams, I know what you say is true about the Special Criminal Court. Of the 42 cases that are still pending in the Special Criminal Court, none of them are to do with gangland. And with the exception of Gilligan and Meehan and a few others, the Dundons, they didn't appear before the Special Criminal Court.
Have I not given you my position on that? I'm not going to change my position because it might be not the popular thing to do. What we have to do is to tackle organised crime.
Okay, but
organised crime can't be tackled.
We'll come to that in a moment. But there's one further point, Gerry Adams. If you're asked to actually be on a jury where you can be identified in a small country like ours and you can be intimidated, let me remind you of the death of Robert McCartney in Belfast. A pub full of people and nobody saw anything. Now, that is chapter and verse as to why you need courts where jurors and witnesses will not be intimidated.
And jurors and witnesses should not be intimidated, but those who are accused, if it was you tomorrow, you would expect to be tried by a jury of your peers. And other states have dealt with bigger problems than us. They have anonymous juries. They use the modern telecommunication systems. They put people in different rooms. But all of this is a distraction, if I may say so, from the core problem that there is a crisis of confidence out there among a lot of citizens because they feel vulnerable in their homes. People have been killed. There's a drugs epidemic on the streets. And I was one of the people who stood with those communities against the drug pushers and against the drug barons, and I make no apologies for that. So what the government have to answer for is, how do you expect to have this organised crime dealt with if you cut the Garda resources, if you cut the Garda figures, if you close Garda stations? How do you expect
Joan
to do it?
Burton, do you want to reply?
Well, it's probably news to Gerry Adams, but this government reopened Templemore that Fianna Fáil had put the shutters on in 2009. And so far, since we reopened it towards the end of 2014, we now have over 1,100 new Gardaí, and currently we have 500 additional Gardaí in training, and we will actually train and graduate 500 to 600 Gardaí a year, every year over the next 5 years.
But on the point of gangland, both yourselves and the Commissioner have said it wasn't about resources. And yet, in the wake of the outrage at the Regency Hotel, you throw money at the problem. €5 million is provided for overtime and for a special unit. So it must be really about resources.
A couple of days before the atrocity at the Regency Hotel, I saw a report in the papers that both Deputy Adams and his deputy leader, Deputy MacDonald, had actually called really for the dismantling of the Offences Against the State Act. That is the bulwark in this country against crimes of terrorism. And I don't know what planet Gerry is living in on this. He suggested that juries could actually go in to a witness protection programme. Now, we have all seen programmes about witness protection programmes. So Sean Citizen and Joan Citizen, who go and offer to sit on a jury in their local court, end up being in a witness protection programme in Canada with their name changed. I think that this is a fantastical idea. And for a man who's auditioning, apparently, to be Taoiseach and to lead a minority government with Fianna Fáil, I think it's an appalling proposal.
Well, this is fairy tales by Joan Burton. Let me say this. She's made a mess of justice. The Garda Commissioner was forced to retire. The Taoiseach's never given a credible. The Taoiseach has never given a credible explanation.
Would you like to reply to the?
I have replied. It's a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale.
About witness protection program. You did mention that in an interview. Witness protection program.
No, I said that other states, and there are many, can deal with bigger problems than the ones that we face without doing away with the fundamental right of being tried by jury. Now, the Taoiseach has yet to give a credible explanation for his role in the debacle which followed the various scandals which led to the forced retirement of the Commissioner and the resignation of his Justice
There
Minister.
were many people in Northern Ireland who would have much preferred the Special Criminal Court than the kangaroo courts that you guys oversaw for many, many years. And that disappeared people like Jean McConville, that kneecapped hundreds and hundreds and thousands of young people. It's the height of hypocrisy.
And what did you do
it's
about
the height
that,
of hypocrisy for you to parade yourself as a civil libertarian,
what did you
objecting
do about
to the
that,
Special
Micheál?
Criminal
What did
Court,
you do about that?
when in fact
What did you do
you
about
knew
that? Scoring
and you
points.
oversaw.
Scoring
I'm not
points.
scoring points. You
Yes,
always
you
say
are.
that when you don't like
You're
it.
making false accusations.
I'm not making false
Yes, you
accusations.
are.
Look at the programme on Spotlight recently.
Go
In
away
terms
and
of
catch yourself
so
on.
there was no young people kneecapped.
Deal with the reality. Deal with the reality that
Why
two
are
men
you
were
interrupting?
killed.
I didn't interrupt you.
You didn't interrupt me. You are telling downright
I did not
lies,
interrupt
and you know it.
And you can't
scoring
allow me
cheap
to say
points.
some home truths to you.
If we had listened to what
Because
Micheál
you
said
admitted,
about the North,
but
there would be no institution in
fine.
place.
But you
He wanted
admitted
the
in the
suspension of the institution.
You admitted to me in the Dáil, having attacked me like you're attacking me now. You eventually admitted in the Dáil. You crawled in and admitted that yes, there was IRA.
I never crawled into the Dáil in my life.
You
I was sent in with a mandate.
You admitted that there was IRA internal courts to deal with child abusers. You admitted that on the floor of Dáil.
Everybody
so
knows
what
what the
rights
IRA
had those people who were abused by members of the Republican
And is that the answer?
What rights had
is that
they?
the answer
No,
to the mess
my
you
point
created
is,
in the Garda
it's some
Síochána?
neck for you
Is that
to say
the
that you
mess
cannot.
you created in the Garda
It's
Síochána?
some neck for you to say we cannot trust our judiciary. I trust our judiciary. I trust on Garda Síochána. And when Dermot Ahern changed the Special Criminal Court legislation to ensure we could bring organised crime within its remit, he did it because jurors were going to be intimidated. And the state solicitor in Limerick, yes, it did.
Did it work? So two people weren't killed last week? So there isn't a drugs epidemic in our cities and villages and towns?
in the Limerick situation, along with other measures in Limerick.
Quick question.
And I think this is very important because you have not answered the question. How do you prevent intimidation of jurors facing these kind of killers?
Is the reason that you are not willing to countenance Sinn Féin in government is that you don't trust them on the security of the state? Is that the reason? Because you're so close together on other issues, maybe?
No. There's attempts being made, and Joan through a simple line. We will not go into government with Sinn Féin because of the reasons I just outlined there.
The politicians here could learn a lesson from the Unionists, who have more reason to distrust Sinn Féin. Ian Paisley can go into government with Mark McGuinness, and Peter Robinson can go into government, and Arlene Foster can go into government with Mark McGuinness.
In fairness, Jerry, that is the system, the Dehan system, that forces you all together.
Because Northern Ireland is a failed entity.
Do you know who will
end the violence?
conversation about who goes into government? Not me, the citizens who give us a mandate, which is as good as anybody else's.
We can decide.
And who makes your
Can we hear from the
decision,
Taoiseach and Kenny on this one?
I've been very patient here.
John,
I've been very patient here. First, let me deplore the threats to the lives of INM journalists by criminal gangs in Dublin. This is disgraceful. It should not stand up in any democracy. Gerry Adams was never a member of the IRA. He never heard or knew anything about safe houses in the Republic where people were sexually abused, despite the public statements of public representatives. We've had people beaten to death, every bone in their body, in cattle yards in the north. He now tells us he sees criminal gangs driving on myriads of byroads in the border area. We should do something about this. I agree with Deputy Adams that Fianna Fáil closed down Templemore. I recall those who murdered Jerry McCabe. I recall the judge's statement about the gross intimidation of witnesses. I recall that charge was reduced to manslaughter. I recall who picked them up when they were released. Deputy Adams, you can rest assured that Fine Gael and Labour in government will continue to see that the Gardaí are employed, appointed and resourced. We've reopened Templemore. And secondly, there will be a second criminal court to deal with the backlog. We cannot tolerate this. Jerry, you have a story to tell.
Garda
And
capacity.
you're not telling the truth
Right.
about lots of it.
You, Taoiseach, have not told the truth of your government's record of broken promise after broken promise after broken promise.
Well,
and not least...
I could agree with you here in this sense that
explain about the debacle. Explain about the debacle.
Fianna Fáil funded 50 vehicles. Last year, the government supported 720 new vehicles for Gardaí.
Look, just go,
Put
Taoiseach,
200
the
million on
problem,
the table so that they
Taoiseach,
could upgrade their
the problem is you're
communication
totally
systems,
disconnected.
tetra radios
You're
and
not
something
knocking on
else.
any doors at all. It's obvious.
You closed down Templemore.
Yeah, and you kept it going for 4 years. But you kept this closure going for 4 years.
In your programme,
you kept the moratorium going for 4 years.
Not only that, here's something else for you.
I mean,
you also said that Gardaí should be turned out of Templemore quicker than they are. And you also put in that it should be 500 Gardaí you'd like to see trained, whereas we're turning out 6 and we'll continue to do that.
We're saying we should go to a strength
But can I just say to you, Taoiseach, that if you had spent the money, 56 million on overtime last year, on new Gardaí working regular hours, you'd have had 1,000 extra Gardaí on the street.
Well, we've had the Garda Inspector's report, which has recommended that over 1,000 Gardaí could be released on duty, and I think that's something being worked on. And secondly, the government have committed now to the appointment of 300 specialist civilians so that Gardaí doing duty in offices can be released also. And we've set up the Special Criminal Bureau. CAB is there for many years following the tragedy of the shooting of Veronica.
But yet there are guys driving around in Maseratis that CAB hasn't touched. Why not?
Yes. Well, operational matters are for the Garda Commissioner. Whatever the Garda Commissioner requires, the government will provide. We will put an end to this.
Micheál Martin, you have suggested a new serious and organised crime unit. It's as if, like, the first series of Love-Hate went out when you were in government.
Yeah.
You know, this is nothing new.
No,
so you didn't do it then.
Well, we did actually, in terms of the Limerick gangs and so on. That was a very successful operation, putting a lot of people behind bars. I agree with the Taoiseach in terms of this has taken a sinister turn in terms of the threats to the journalists and the Irish Independent. This is a direct attack on our state and on our society. You threaten journalists, you threaten all of us. And I acknowledge that in 2009, in the teeth of the crash and the crisis, yes, there was a moratorium on recruitment, but they kept the moratorium going for 4 years. And the problem is, I'm talking to Gardaí every day. And they're saying to us in the privacy of their homes. Like they don't get it when politicians say, oh, there's this 500 cars. They don't see it, Taoiseach. In large terrains across this country, there's one squad car per night covering that terrain. Before these appalling murders, there was a real issue with burglary. We were saying it to you day in and day out in Dáil Éireann for the last 3 years. We've been saying to you there's a problem with burglary, and you keep on denying it. You keep on denying it.
It's incredible how your memory is gone.
If I have to say, the tirade and the rant of half-truths and propaganda against Sinn Féin from these three people will bring very little comfort to those folks tonight who want to see a guard on the beat, who want to see community safety, who want to be safe in their own homes. And you can't back away from the fact that between you cut Garda numbers. Now, you had a choice, but you decided, as you decided in other matters, to give... Sorry, let me finish. Let me finish.
600 a year.
Taoiseach, please.
You have 1,100 extra guards
billions to the banks. Billions to the banks. Billions to the banks. Even a fraction of that going into any of these public services.
Guys, we're going to move on to other matters.
And law and order.
We want to move on to something else.
All right, we're going to talk now about repealing the Eighth Amendment, because that's a key issue for many viewers and voters watching tonight. Enda Kenny, what do you say to a woman who's just gotten a diagnosis that the baby she's carrying has a life-limiting condition and she wants to have a termination? What do you say to that woman?
Well, first of all, these are the most sensitive personal cases that one can come across. The Eighth Amendment was introduced in 1983, 33 years ago. Our society and our country has changed since then. We now know far more about the profound trauma, the profound despair that a condition of fatal fetal abnormality on an unborn is for a woman and her partner. So, given that the Eighth Amendment is in the Constitution, my belief is that what we should do with this is, first of all, depoliticise it. Secondly, have a citizens' convention that will look at the moral, legal, human aspects of all of this.
Okay, and I understand that.
Just let me finish. That it can be teased out fully and comprehensively, so that if we get to a point where either you consider an adjustment of the Eighth Amendment, an insertion into the Eighth Amendment, or something to be taken out of it, that you do so with the reflection of the values of our society, which has changed over the last number of years.
But Enda Kenny, that is no good. That's no good to a woman in this country who has gotten that diagnosis this week, and she wants to have a termination. So is this government saying to her, was your government saying to her, gather up your money, book a flight, try and organise childcare and take some annual leave and go to the UK?
Well,
I mean, what's the advice to
do-
someone in that circumstance?
Okay, I just spoke to the aunt of a young woman just this week whose child was born and lived for 25 minutes. She had been told that it was a fatal fetal abnormality, but she made the choice to give the
And
birth.
that's fine for those people.
Yes.
But for the
No.
people who want to have
Well,
a termination,
abortion-
are you saying just book your flight and go?
No, abortion in our constitution is illegal,
Yeah.
except in very specific circumstances. For over 30 years, no government dealt with what the Supreme Court said they should do,
And
which
I
was
understand
legislate.
that.
Well, just a second. The government legislated for this in the Protection of Life Bill. Now, you can't change the law just like that.
I
It
know
is
that.
a written
What
constitution.
is your own position? Because you're here tonight as part of a leaders' debate. What is your own position? What's Fine Gael's position on this? Do you want to retain the status quo, or do you want to make terminations legal in this country in the case of fatal fetal abnormalities?
I think it's entirely appropriate. I think it's entirely
No,
appropriate.
what's your own position?
Yes, I'm going to tell you if you let me. I think it's entirely appropriate that I should consider, along with everybody else, the stories of the brave women who come forward and tell us of the profound experience and trauma that this means.
I understand that. But what is Fine Gael's position? Should you be able to have a termination in this country if you have a fatal fetal abnormality situation?
Fine Gael's position is that we have legislated for...
OK, so you're not going to answer the question.
If you let me finish, please. Fine Gael's position is that we have the Eighth Amendment. We have legislated for what that means. If you are to change anything in the Constitution, you are going to have to get a consensus. And that means that you should depoliticise
And I
this
understand that,
argument.
but right now, I'm talking about
the
right
Fine Gael
now.
party has so many views across the spectrum. And what I did say, that following the Protection of Life Bill, engagement with an expert group, full consensus or discussion among the Oireachtas, and then make the decision. The same will apply with society.
Let me move on.
Oireachtas.
I just want to get everyone in here. Micheál Martin, you said before you didn't want to go there on this subject. Will you go there tonight? What's Fianna Fáil's position?
But Fianna Fáil, first of all, we have freedom of conscience within the parliamentary party. So each individual, when this scenario is presented to them, or when any proposal to amend or to change the Eighth Amendment...
But you're not campaigning for a referendum,
are you? We're not promoting the idea of repeal of the Eighth. I actually think the slogan repeal the Eighth is too simplistic for a general election. I have a lot of experience of the issue, having brought through one constitutional amendment back in 2002. It does actually need very considered thinking in terms of the moral, ethical and legal. I would prefer a judge-led commission to be fed into an Oireachtas committee, which has happened twice before and actually did produce results.
But Micheál
most
Martin, I want to
recently
talk
in the
to you
last
about that
style.
particular scenario that I put to Enda Kenny. So the current position where a woman who has a baby with a fatal fetal abnormality and she wants to have a termination, what's the advice? Book your flight and go?
Well, obviously it's up to each individual family in that situation to have to make a decision within the current parameters of the law. And I'm not going to advise an individual family in terms of what is an appalling and very traumatic situation. But if I could say to say this, that obviously it would need to, if one was to facilitate fatal fetal abnormalities, and I understand where people are coming from. I've met the parents there. You'd have to change the Constitution. The legal opinion is that you can't do it by legislation alone.
And the Labour Party's position on this is very clear, because you have committed, Joan Burton, haven't you, to having a referendum if you get back into government within 18 months. And you want to legislate, and you're in favour of terminations in the cases of fatal fetal abnormalities. So that would suggest that there's a division between yourself and Fine Gael on this issue, and yet you're asking our voters and our viewers tonight to re-elect you, and yet you're not singing off the same hymn sheet on this one.
When we went into government with Fine Gael, the X case and the ABC cases, particularly where the mother's life was in danger, was something that the courts had said that Ireland needed to legislate for. Through discussion and very detailed advice being obtained from legal and medical people, we actually were able to identify how to deal with that. And although we had been talking about this for 30 years... Now, can I set out the Labour Party's position?
No, but you're asking the voters to re-elect you. So what do you think of Enda Kenny's position and Fine Gael's position?
Can I, just as a mother, speak about this? You asked both of the men there to speak about it. So can I speak about it as a woman and a mother? I've known people affected by fatal fetal abnormality. Some have elected, as the Taoiseach said, to carry the baby to term in Ireland. Others have been forced to leave Ireland and have a termination elsewhere. That was the 20th century solution for Ireland. I believe that we need a process, and
so you don't agree with Enda Kenny's position on it then?
The Labour Party's position is very clear. In the case of fatal fetal abnormality, we would like to see the matter go back to the people, and we would like to see the people.
But you want to be re-elected in coalition with Fine Gael, and they have a different position to you.
To repeal the Eighth Amendment.
All right, I just want, in the interest of fairness, Gerry Adams, what is Sinn Féin's position on this one? Because you didn't have a position, did you, when Claire Daly brought her bill before the Dáil?
Well, first of all, a woman who is affected with a fatal fetal abnormality who wants to go full term should do so, and that is her right.
Sure.
But a woman who doesn't want to go full term should have the right to have a termination. At the time when that motion was put to the Dáil, we didn't have a position, but we went and listened to people who have gone through this trauma, and we went to our Ardèche, and our Ardèche endorsed a position which is to amend the Eighth Amendment and to bring in legislation. That's the responsibility. We're the lawmakers. We should be bringing in legislation.
What about Deputy Peadar Tóibín, one of the Sinn Féin TDs? He's Conservative on this issue.
I wouldn't say he's Conservative on the issue. He's his own position on the issue, and he's entitled to do that. But the party authority in Sinn Féin is the Ardèche. It meets every year and deals with all of those issues, and that was brought forward. It was debated out. It was also debated, incidentally, in the Assembly yesterday. And there was a very, very sensitive debate on the Assembly on this issue too.
All right. Does it make you uncomfortable talking about this, Taoiseach?
Not at all. It does not make me uncomfortable. As I said, our society has changed. But if we're to deal with the Eighth Amendment, I think there's a consensus that we need a process by which you can get to a point where, if you can put this to the people, how do you reflect society's values in the Constitution?
Just another point to ponder for all of you. Someone comes into your clinics on a Saturday morning, someone in distress, they've had an abortion in this jurisdiction. Would you call the ambulance first or call the cops?
You would absolutely call the ambulance.
And then would you call the cops? Someone's broken the law.
No, you don't know what the circumstances are that gave rise to it. You would actually provide the woman with the medical care and attention she needed. And there is hardly a hospital in Ireland which looks after pregnant women and women who've delivered who wouldn't actually provide that treatment.
OK, all right.
We have a very
Halappanavar springs to mind. Anyway, we'll move on. There's a Tonight Show special at 10:30. Ivan Yates and guests will have analysis and reaction to this debate. But coming up next, we'll be talking about where you live. Stay with us.
You're welcome back. Just a reminder, following the Leaders' Debate here on TV3, it's an extended Tonight programme with Ivan Yates and guests. They'll be analysing and providing reaction to the first live Leaders' Debate of Vote 2016, and that's at 10:30 here on TV3. So we're going to move on and talk about housing now. Joan Burton, yourself and Enda Kenny are talking about thousands more jobs and welcoming emigrants back into the country. Where are they all going to live? We've no houses.
Well, that's why this government and the Labour Party have put together the largest housing investment package that this country has ever seen, 3.8 billion. This year and last year and the year before, we actually opened up what people often see in cities and towns in Ireland, boarded up local authority properties, apartments and houses. In 2015, we opened up 2,500 of those, and they're now occupied by families and individuals. We've also created a system of two-year rent freeze, which we believe will actually help renters in the market.
The charge is, Joan Burton, that this government has presided over the biggest housing crisis in decades in this country. It was on your watch.
Well, the biggest housing crisis has its roots in the decision by Fianna Fáil, by accident or design, I'm not sure which, to actually end the tradition of local authorities building houses. And basically that died. And now we have to recreate that. Local authorities even lost the skills. They thought they were property developers and not social housing developers. But what I'm also anxious to do, and in my own constituency, we have a lot of young people now working for 8 or 10 years who can afford to buy, and we want to help them with a Save to Buy scheme, whereby if they save for 3 to 5 years, they will get a top-up when they buy the house of $1,200 a year.
Well, let's just focus on the people who are renting at the moment. When Fine Gael and Labour came into government in 2011, there were 16,000 properties to be rented. That's according to daft.ie this week. There was 3,600 properties for rent at the start of this month.
And at the moment, the Department of Social Protection pays for the rent on 65,000 properties, Colette. I don't know if you know that, through the rent supplement. And secondly, through the housing assistance payments and other payments in the local authorities, there's another 30,000 houses rented. So actually, about a third of the housing rental market is rented for social housing through rent supplement and through the local authorities. And we now deal on a case-by-case basis. We text everybody on rent supplement every month. If they have a problem with the landlord,
Father Peter McVerry was on radio this week
and
he said that, you know, while Alan Kelly, he said, and was listening to him, he said that your department stymied them on rent supplement.
No, because what we do now, and I don't think Father Peter is familiar with what we do. Last year, for instance, we had 6,500 rentals through the department and another 6,500 new rentals through the local authorities. That's 13,000
Micheál Martin
rentals.
wants to get in here.
That's a lot of rentals.
I think we need to have some facts here. Between 2007 and 2010, the Fianna Fáil-led government built 14,000 social houses, actual social houses. In the last 5 years, Fine Gael and Labour built just over 1,000.
And who crashed the economy?
But it's incredible for you to tell an untruth there that said we ended social housing building.
You did end
we didn't.
social housing.
We built 14,000. No, the other point is, in 2012, there was about 8 families going homeless per month. In 2014, that rose to 40 families per month.
And we have 65,000
it rose, I didn't interrupt you, Joan, it rose to over 70. But would you listen, please? No, the problem is this. Threshold for Peter McVerry, Simon, Focus Ireland, all said, I didn't interrupt you, Joan, all said to you at the time, in 2012, when you reduced the rent allowance and the rent cap, what did they say to you? They said you were going to drive vulnerable families into homelessness.
We actually raised rents by 10%.
And you have put your head in the sand ever since, and you will not listen. And you just said there, you just said that Father Peter McVerry wasn't familiar. Which, of course, Father Peter McVerry is familiar. He knows only too well what's going on. And the problem is, you haven't listened. You haven't listened over the last 3 years. It was only, and you go and knock on doors, and people are saying to us they're offended. They're offended by the level of homelessness. That's saying, no. The bottom line is this: we built more social housing than you did.
And the developers in the good old days, and councils
it would be far better if you listened to those at the coalface who are telling the story. It's not the source.
Micheál Martin, I want to read you out something that was on the front of the Evening Echo newspaper, a Cork newspaper, in the last couple of days. And it said, it's a report from the Cork City Council, and it said half of the homes that were being offered by Cork City Council are refused by people on social housing waiting lists, with some people rejecting them for, quote, fantasy reasons. And that's the head of housing in City Hall, Valerie O'Sullivan. And she's casting doubt on the nature of the social housing crisis, saying that there's an actual frenzy surrounding the issue, and it's inaccurate.
No, I wouldn't accept that at all. I mean,
but she's not a politician.
But I know Valerie, but for the first time in my political life, I've had mothers coming into my clinics crying because they have 3 weeks to get out with 4 or 5 kids. I met her mother in a supermarket just 3 weeks ago, who was in the Travelodge Hotel in Cork for 2 months and spent spent her Christmas with her 5 teenagers in the Travelodge. This is a sorry, Joan. This is a very real problem, Colette. It's a crisis that this government allowed to become a crisis because it was a problem 3 years ago. They were asleep on the wheel.
Wasn't it your party that has in the position, in terms of property, where builders are now in a position where they're not even willing to build because there's no margins, there's no profits to be made. I mean, it's a supply and demand situation.
This government didn't have a policy on housing. When they came in, the prices were actually low. There was actually great availability. These guys just didn't see this problem coming. And it's the classic illustration of how a problem becomes a crisis. And in terms of the rent allowance policy, there's no clearer link between cause and effect than the decision of Joe Burton to reduce rent allowance. And there is no connection at all. You just talk to the families, talk to the young women who cannot get rent that will match the market rent.
All right, I just want to get Jerry Adams. In the interest of balance, I just want to get Jerry.
The staff in the Department of Social Protection in Cork who work night and day to help homeless families. You should be generous enough to acknowledge those staff.
Are saying to the people, we don't have anywhere to put you.
When somebody comes into your clinic, can I please ask you to contact the Community Welfare Service? Because
Joan,
we are constantly housing people.
What planet are you living in?
We are constantly housing people.
Okay, I want to get Gerry Adamson. I want to get Gerry.
Okay. We're wrong to degrade the staff.
Guys, hang on a second. Hang on a second.
Okay, Gerry Adams.
Can I just want to say something? I'm here and I'm listening to this five-way at the moment, and I can't understand it. What chance of the people at home, guys?
Okay, all right, I want to ask you, Gerry Adams, because you've got a social housing policy yourself, right? And the irony of you talking about social housing, when you're against property tax here in the south, but you're in government in the north where you're pro-property tax, so you're sort of pro-austerity in the north, but not pro-austerity here in the south, and property tax helps build those social houses that we're talking about.
Well, first of all, people don't pay a property tax in the north. That's first of all. Let's be accurate. We have so many. Please, I'm not going to be part of this Punch and Judy Act. People are looking for solutions. But people in the north, and we shouldn't compare the two, they pay rates, and for that they get.
But that's property tax.
No. They pay a whole range, and they get lighting, they get decent roads, they get leisure centres. And I'm not here to argue for the system in the north. There are 100,000 people on the social waiting list here, who are homeless. There are 1,500 children here. Now, listening to this, what these people want from us is to have their problem solved. They're looking for solutions. And what I said in my opening remarks, and this is an act of conviction by me, is that citizens in a republic have rights. And that includes the right to a home. And the state has a responsibility to provide that home. So we have put forward a costed, social and affordable housing programme. You guys built in the last year 28 at local authority level. You never built one. You never built one.
Let Enda Kenny answer that. Let Enda Kenny answer that.
2,500 individuals
Joan,
and families now have houses.
Let the teacher get.
May I make a point that something absolutely fundamental to every family is a house and a home at affordable prices. Now, we've got a fix on this, and our plan is to bring sustainable levels of building to 25,000 a year. All right. In the so-called veneer of boom times, we were building 90,000 houses. That collapsed to just under 7,000. 170,000 construction workers lost their jobs, and there were 3,000 ghost estates left around the country when this collapsed. We've got to deal with that problem. So
okay, how are you going to deal with it? Builders aren't building. They're not making any margins.
$3 billion on the table for social housing. They've given the targets and the numbers to every local authority and said, get on with it. We've changed the regulations in Dublin in terms of building. We've dropped the levies in Cork and in Dublin for builders to get into building houses.
And they're still not doing it.
Joan Burton is correct when she says that Micheál could have sent that good lady in Cork to the Social Welfare Office because assistance for 6,500 to stay in the house in which she was.
Okay.
So we've got a clear plan here. We don't want a situation where.
All right, Enda Kenny, let's talk about the people who are watching us tonight from rented accommodation, right?
Yes.
And they're on a decent enough wage, and they were paying maybe €800 or €900 last October, November, and then the rent cap came in, and overnight their landlord came into them and said it's €1,300, it's €1,400.
Yes.
So they're able to make those payments, these astronomical payments, because of this demand and supply issue, and yet they can't get together the money for a mortgage because the central bank regulations don't take account of that now.
Yes, but the point, you put your finger on the exact point here. This is about a supply position. And for people who say just increase the rent subsidy, that does nothing to increase
but what
the number of houses
to make builders build more?
You've got to build houses. The more houses you've built, the less the pressure on the market.
But they're not building them. That's my point. They're not building them.
No, but that's why we've changed the regulations. We've changed the building regulations. We've dropped the levies in Cork and Dublin. We've given them authorisation and the local authorities to build in a much more expeditious fashion.
Okay, they're moving on this, Micheál Martin. That's what he's saying. They're moving on this.
They're moving on this. Tonight in this city, there are 1,600 children in emergency accommodation.
That's unacceptable.
They haven't moved on this at all. It's a scandal of unprecedented proportions. And they took the eye off the ball. And what was a housing problem became a housing crisis because of their lack of action, and also the fact that they don't listen. Because year after year, for the last 3 years, we were saying this to the government in the Dáil, and the Taoiseach kept dismissing it and kept denying
was responsible for
that
the
there was a
collapse of the
problem.
entire construction sector. 170,000 workers lost
the bottom
their
line
jobs.
is this:
3,000 ghost estates left around the country.
you had a housing.
That's your legacy.
Yeah, and where are you now? You have no houses now to house people.
3,000
you have no houses
ghost
at all,
estates.
and you have no policy or no
like
initiative.
Tent.
You have no initiative.
Jerry Adams. Jerry Adams. Jerry Adams.
Taoiseach, this is a question for you. I asked you numerous times in the course of the last term to empower the central bank to put a cap on mortgages. I asked you that numerous times. I raised with you numerous times the social consequences of your policies when you were giving the money to the elites in the golden circles, and I said there are dire social consequences in terms of housing, in terms of homelessness, in terms of unemployment, in terms of forced emigration, and desperate consequences for people in rural areas.
When this government was elected to office in
sorry,
2011...
just the question is very simple. You said no, you would not ask, or you would not empower the central bank to intervene. We also put it to you that you should link rent to inflation. You refused to do that as well. You handed this issue over to the landlords.
Yeah, you have all the answers, but you have fantasy figures.
No, I don't.
Now, when this government was elected to
yourself
office,
on.
the Troika were here, completely dependent upon international finance. It cost us 64 billion, 32 billion gone to Anglo-Irish dead money. We'll get back the other 32 billion for the taxpayer from AIB and from Bank of Ireland in due course.
Because you inherited a plan from Brian Lenihan,
you know, Deputy Adams,
which you implemented in
that
an
the
unfair way
regulator
and
for
unjust way,
mortgages
but
is the central bank.
Okay,
and
all right.
I wrote to the central bank
to
on several occasions, excuse me, to say if you require a change in legislation, we'll give it to you.
Okay, all right. Okay, we're against the clock here, so we're going to have to move on. We're against the clock, so we're going to have to move on. So, Enda Kenny, could you just stop?
We want to move on. The people watching here are hoping that this debate will inform their choice. But the question is, what will be the outcome in a couple of weeks' time? And we're wondering, in terms of coalition, Micheál Martin, you said that you are not contemplating Enda Kenny being in government in any shape or form. So who do you think will be in government?
Well, the bottom line is this. We've just discussed the chaos in housing. We've just discussed the chaos in crime, the chaos in health. And Enda says, let's keep this going. I'm saying the last thing we can do is keep this going.
Okay, but look,
hear me out,
please. 35, 40 seats for Fianna Fáil.
I deal with the polls.
If it's going to be you, who's with you?
But you're dependent on the polls. The problem with the polls is, look at the British election. All 11 polling companies got it wrong. All 11 polling companies.
A small enough margin.
6.5%.
Exactly. 6.5% more for you would not get you into government.
6.5% is a huge margin, which would have huge influence.
6.5% would not get you into government without some help from Jerry or Joe.
We won't be going in with Sinn Féin, but there's a further point here, Pat. There's a further point here. That not only was it a mistake, did they get it wrong, the debate was skewed insofar as no one ever discussed the Tory majority in the British election. The BBC apologised afterwards for talking about coalitions and so on like that. We should learn lessons.
Okay, but if
We're not
Enda Kenny's
immune
not in
from the
government,
faults of polls
do you
and so on like
anticipate
that.
that you will be leading a government if he's not?
We're putting a choice before the people, because the people are entitled to a choice between a Fianna Fáil-led government and a Fine Gael-led government which looks after the wealthiest. We have made it clear we're not going into government with Sinn Féin under any circumstances, and we're not going into government with Fine Gael.
How about Labour?
And then it depends. We've said anybody else in terms of other parties and other individuals who share our principles.
Jerry Adams, you said that you would contemplate Fianna Fáil, for example, but only if your party was the lead party in a coalition.
See, what Micheál did, he made a mistake by making his party entirely irrelevant, and then he's been clawing back and he's trying to pay, teasing with these different issues about who he may be in government with. We're very, very clear. There are 96 candidates in this election who have signed up to a right to change, including 50 Sinn Féin candidates in 40 constituencies. The first phase of our project is to get as many of those people elected as possible.
But you're not willing to coalesce as a minority partner. That is a bottom line.
We're not going to do what the Labour Party did, sell the people out.
Okay, speaking of the Labour Party, Joan Burton, number one, you've got to save your own seat. You've got to save your party to be in any fit shape to join in a coalition. Do you have reservations about going back, as you had in the past, to Fianna Fáil?
Pat, there's a fault line in this debate tonight that runs down the middle of the studio. Myself and the Taoiseach have got 140,000 people back to work, kick-started the economy, invested in new schools, put 3.8 billion into housing.
Bravo.
And the gentleman opposite,
Bravo.
well, bravo for the work of our people. And don't be so snide and cheap
but
about
Joan,
the Republic.
Joan, can I just ask you this? Look,
they see Jerry Adams doesn't understand the Republic.
No, but
he sees
Joan,
nothing good about this
pause for a
country.
second and answer this
The
question.
people are great,
Jerry,
including those
one
who
second.
voted for you and who you let down.
The Progressive Democrats fell apart.
Wait till we see what you do in the North and you're
after
doing
a
at the
coalition
moment.
with a
Wait till they
major
see it.
partner, the Progressive Democrats went. The Green Party decimated after a partnership with a major partner. You are in government with Fine Gael, and many of your supporters would say it's that association which has lost you numbers. Why would you want to stay with the people who are hurting your party?
I'll tell you why. Because this government has created a recovery through the sacrifices of people in this country. Now, this election is about the next 5 years. And I know, standing talking to people with their little children beside them in the hall of their homes, they want a future for their children.
Correct.
The gentlemen opposite don't
Correct.
offer a future. All they see is everything being wrong. Now, the Labour Party has also brought a vital balance to this
All right, can I
government.
go to the Taoiseach
And
now?
we can now
May I say
make a future for this country which will get everybody who wants a job into a job by
That's fine. But
2018.
if we
That's our
take,
plan. And
Joan,
we will work together
if we take
on
the
that.
polls, all of the polls that are predicting what's happening, there is no way that Fine Gael and Labour at the moment can make up a government on their own. The bookies are saying that the most likely stable government that can be formed is Micheál Martin's party and Enda Kenny's party. And they're offering 13 to 8, which is tight odds
We've
now.
actually come full circle here. Our slogan for this election is keep the recovery going. You can't have houses, schools, teachers, Gardaí, nurses, doctors, unless you have an economy that's thriving. And when Micheál says keep it going, I'm talking about keep the recovery going that everybody can see. Of course it's not all around the country.
Go
Now,
to
the
rural
question
Ireland,
for the
nobody
people
sees
is
it.
this. The question when they go to vote with
Go to Mayo,
with their
Taoiseach.
Pan Louis and their pens,
Go to
when
the
they go
West.
to vote, who are they going to trust to mind this economy in their interests? And it is the people who deserve all the credit. Are they going to go back to a party in government that wrecked our economy, that lost 300,000 jobs and forced emigration on 250,000 people? Or are they going to say to a government that comes from two different persuasions, but that fixed this country's finances
Can I deal
and
with that, Pat?
is putting
Very
our country
quickly.
back to work?
I have to
And
nail-
I would say this, with Eamon Gilmore, the Taoiseach before, Taoiseach Joan Burton, the Fine Gael and Labour Party have worked in the interests of all the people of our island. I know
But
the
Can I deal
kind
with
of
this, Pat?
country we
It's very
can have,
important.
but I would
I've got to nail-
respectfully
I've got to
ask you
nail
to
this
consider
very
this
Okay,
very
so
carefully.
you're not contemplating any coalition with,
commit.
even though it might be the stable bloc, your
My-
two
Pat,
parties,
my
who
proposition-
only have an ancient civil
my
war
final
between
comment
you.
on
Let
this.
me just say this much.
My final
I want to
comment
nail
is
this.
this.
Taoiseach, you've
This is
said-
no time to mess around
Micheál,
with
you
uncertainty
said
and
Taoiseach-
instability.
Micheál Martin.
Taoiseach and
Fine Gael
Taoiseach.
and Labour will bring stability
I wanna
and
nail-
clarity and accountability.
Okay,
I
Micheál
want
Martin.
to nail the fairy tale that they delivered recovery. In 2009, 2010, the toughest decisions were taken in terms of financially
Yes.
correcting
You
the
let us to
recovery.
pay
And
3
Joan
billion
Burton,
you're trying
Joan
to
Burton
Irish.
and
You
Enda
took
Kenny
614
voted against
million
every
extra
one
income
of
tax
those
increases.
measures and are now claiming
And
credit
you cut
for
the
the
minimum
impact
wage.
of them.
You
You
cut the
inherited a
minimum wage,
plan
the
cut
from
the
Brian
minimum wage and
Lennon,
the blind
a
pension and the
four-year
disability
plan,
allowance.
which
But
you
Micheál,
implemented it, but made it more
Micheál,
unjust and
people at
unfair.
home would
And
think you're
I-
trying to create
No, people understand
2016
this.
as year zero for Fianna Fáil. You have a history, and it's a
sorry,
pretty...
They wrecked our country,
They
they
did
should never
not
be let near
deliver the
government.
recovery.
Jerry
And people
Adams.
understand
Jerry
that.
Adams.
How can we
It's the
trust
knowledge and
Jerry
skills of
Jerry
the
Adams.
people.
Some of the ministers
Jerry
who
Adams,
helped
please.
in
And we
crashes.
don't want to keep this
Jerry
going
Adams.
of the housing crisis, health and crime.
Jerry Adams.
Fianna Fáil created the mess. Fine Gael and Labour perpetuated it. Now, they've had their chance. Since the state was founded since partition. This is the first
Sinn
chance
Féin will drive
for a
jobs
really
out of the country by the
viable
thousands.
Republican alternative. I'm appealing to people
And in
to
the
vote
North,
for those
and in
in
the
the
North,
right to
your
change
party is
and to
now
vote for Sinn Féin in
introducing
every
austerity.
single
Can I
constituency.
Can I ask you,
Sinn
Jerry
Féin
Adams, this,
would
because this is
drive jobs
important.
out of the-
If there
out of the
are
country by the
reservations
thousands.
about your party, the economy is what the government parties are trying to say. You're not good on the economy,
We're
not
very
safe
good
on the economy. Okay, but
In the North?
you have a voting strength at the moment, it looks like 17, 18% in the polls, all the different polls. And yet only 13% would support you to run the economy in another poll. So it means that a third of your own voters don't trust you on the economy.
Well, let the
And they're
people
right.
have their say on election day, because they've tried this and they've tried that. and both of them have failed the people. Give us a chance, and we will not make one promise that we won't keep.
Can I ask you all this? We have the bottom line here. Gerry Adams will not go into a government unless they are the lead party.
No, hold on, Pat. You could have an amalgamation of parties.
Okay.
There are 96 right to govern, right to change.
Micheál Martin, you will not coalesce with either Fine Gael or with Sinn Féin.
Can I make a point?
Joan will make an arrangement with her current party. But I want to ask you this. Will you all pledge to say to stick with this, or will you say afterwards, well, the electorate have spoken. I know we said we wouldn't coalesce with A, B or C, but should the voters are sovereign.
I would make this point, Pat, serious point. There are external issues out there that are of grave concern to all of us. This is not a time for instability. This is not a time to put together an amalgam of different parties that are not capable of dealing with the
So you're sticking with your conviction at the moment?
My proposition to the Irish people is to vote Fine Gael and vote Labour.
We cannot continue with the chaotic performance of this government in terms of public services and our lack of investment in public service and commitment to them.
We're seeking a mandate to be in government. We are in government in the north, and we wouldn't even have a government in the north if we listened to these folks.
All right, and finally, Joan Burton.
We want to be in government
And
here if we're given a
finally,
mandate.
I don't want to see a Minister for Education saying what the Sinn Féin Minister for Education said to students studying to be teachers, that unfortunately Sinn Féin would not be able to provide teaching jobs in the north.
Not a lot of love ahead of Valentine's Day here, Pat. No.
We have to leave it there. Our thanks to Joan Burton, to Gerry Adams, to Enda Kenny and to Micheál Martin for joining us this evening. I hope you'll join me tomorrow morning. We'll be discussing all of this on News Talk from 10, News Talk 106 to 108.
Next on TV3, the Tonight programme with Ivan Yates. He and his guests will cover reaction and analysis of this leaders' debate. Good night.
Good night.